So you get a call for what seems like a really decent gig opportunity. But when it's time to start talking about how much you're going to get paid, they tell you the gig is for exposure. Should you do it? Let's talk about it coming up. Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome to Music Space, where we help working musicians just like you learn how to quickly and easily make a living with your craft. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. So if you've been gigging for any substantial period of time, you've likely gotten at least a few calls with the idea of playing for exposure. And in a world where musicians like us, we work for a living and we want to get paid for what we do, the word exposure is like hearing nails on a chalkboard. One of the reasons for this is that in most cases, when people are trying to ask you to do gigs for exposure, they're either just trying to be really cheap or they're trying to get over on you. And as such, we've become really sensitive and cynical about the word exposure, and we immediately get turned off by it. But I'm going to tell you why you should be doing at least some gigs for the purpose of exposure. But before we get into it, I want to let you know about my free ebook that you can download today. Now, this ebook will give you 10 tips that you can start using literally today to start making more money as a musician. And I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well. Okay, look, one of the most important things that you can do as a musician if you want to start making a living with your craft or just making more money, period, is establish yourself as a brand. Now, I'll get into branding and what that really means in another video because it's such an important topic that it deserves its own video. But suffice it to say that when people hire you, when people are looking to give you lots of money, what they invest in is a brand. And I'm telling you, if you get this right, you set yourself up for making lots and lots of money. People in companies and businesses who pay out large amounts and large sums of money usually do so, or they usually are more inclined to do so with brands, established brands, and more specifically, business brands. And one of the main ways that brands make a name for themselves and therefore make money for themselves is through exposure of that brand. So for example, you ever go to an event and you see this, say, small t-shirt company or bakery or, self-made bakery person selling and exposing their products. Usually they're there to expose their business and to provide exposure for their business and make a name for themselves. And a lot of times they have to pay even for those vendor tables. So a lot of times they're paying to be there. Now, granted, some of them get to sell their products, so they make a little bit more money back on the back end, but they're still paying for the exposure to be there. And one of the main reasons that they do this is because doing things like that provide exposure for them and their brands. They do things like give out business cards and brochures and samples of their work or their, food or whatever the case may be, all with the hopes of gaining exposure and putting a name in people's head about what they do. And to illustrate this, let's just talk about it in terms of other industries, say the food industry. There's peanut butter and then there's Jiffy peanut butter, brand. There's potato chips and then there's Doritos, brand. There's coffee and then there's Starbucks, brand. There's energy drinks and then there's Red Bull, brand. So you see how the brand name sets these companies apart in a larger market? And this is why it's really important for us as musicians, if we want to make more money or want to make a living at what we do, to establish ourselves as brands. I mean, at any given time, there's 100 or 1,000 other bands that's seeking the same opportunities as you are. So what makes you different than those other artists or bands? Why would someone choose you as a musician or artist over another musician or an artist? I mean, really, you need to be able to set yourself up to say there's musicians and then there's you. Now, how this relates to exposure is these brands consistently and continually do things to provide exposure and awareness for themselves and their brands. Both Doritos and Starbucks have kiosks at malls and at department stores and things like that where they give away samples of their work, and you consistently and continually have Starbucks and Doritos brand name in your mind. Even Red Bull has the little Mini Cooper cars that they drive around that has the little trunk that's full of Red Bulls, and they show up at these events and football games and all of this kind of stuff, and they give away samples of their drinks and of their products simply for the purpose of exposure and keeping their names in people's minds. The thing to get here is that people need to know who you are, and they need to know what they're getting when they hire you. This is why you should really give some serious consideration to at least doing some gigs for the purpose of exposure and awareness of who you are. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to take every gig that's thrown your way for the purposes of exposure. I'm definitely not saying that. But it does mean you need to make exposure a part of your business plan in your efforts to make more money and make a living as an artist. This is sort of a chess game move, where a move like this now can set you up for bigger successes in the future. The thing is, we musicians have become so accustomed to basically just sitting on the couch waiting for that call that says, hey, can you play here next weekend? And then the pay coming after that. We're so used to that immediate gratification of pay that we don't even consider things like doing things like this for exposure. But this is really about doing the necessary things and taking the necessary actions that's going to help catapult your career as a musician or an artist. And the thing is, it really only takes being in front of the right people at the right time sometimes to skyrocket your career. So the next time someone asks you to do a gig for the purposes of exposure, make sure you give it fair consideration before just writing it off. And also make sure you're ready to capitalize on any opportunities that may come from it.